Huawei is pretty much a hardware-oriented smartphone brand. They have been at the forefront of innovation for a while now, and although there are several different implementations of dual cameras on smartphones now, it's safe to say that Huawei was the one that popularized and perfected the whole concept. Honor, being a sub-brand, is fortunate enough to be granted access to this high level of technology and innovation, and the latest View 10 from Honor seems to be packing a lot of camera goodness if the spec sheet is anything to go by. However, having an impressive spec sheet and actually performing well are two different things. This is Sandeep from RevAtlas. Let's go and flex the camera muscles on this thing. Let's get the specifications on the table first so we all know what is what. There are dual cameras at the back, and yes, they are still a combination of RGB and monochrome. This should by right give better sharpness, improve dynamic range, and also better detailing, since the camera captures the color information from the RGB sensor and details from the monochrome sensor. The RGB sensor is a 16 megapixel unit with f1.8 aperture, while the monochrome sensor has 20 megapixels of resolution with the same aperture. Considering that it takes details from the monochrome sensor, having a larger resolution makes sense. Monochrome sensors are also more sensitive to light, and as a result the dynamic range is also improved. Now onto the image quality. The images captured on the View 10 are really impressive. I would say that it captures the most amount of detail of any smartphone in this segment. The dynamic range is also pretty impressive by default, and the colors are really accurate. The HDR mode does help improve the dynamic range a bit by bumping up the shadows. However, it is more natural in terms of processing compared to the likes of the Pixel and Galaxy phones. Low light performance too is really good, and there isn't much noise that creeps in at any time. Even if it does, you could possibly use portrait mode or the wide aperture effect mode to mask the noise to a big extent if the situation allows it. There's a portrait mode on board that does blur the background and isolate the subject or object a bit. However, it isn't as pronounced as some of the other smartphones on the market and can seem a bit underwhelming. But there's a wide aperture mode which uses a blurring algorithm to create an electronic depth of field that mimics how a camera with variable aperture would capture photos. You can choose an aperture value anywhere from f.95 all the way down to f16. Naturally, as you would see in a real camera too, the depth of field goes from shallow to deep as you step down the aperture. In this particular mode, the blurring is much more pronounced, especially if you set it to something like f4 and above, and the algorithm is really great too. This mode also allows users to refocus on any part of the frame that they like after the photo is taken, and even adjust the aperture effects after the fact. It seems like the smartphone spots the highlights and then converts them into beautiful looking bokeh balls. For some, this may seem a bit artificial, especially at f.95, and we feel that f4 is sort of a sweet spot to get an image that looks naturally blurred and having a sufficient depth of field without losing out much on sharpness either. Monochrome images are of course true monochrome on this, and as a result is also more pleasing than just photos that have been desaturated. The tones, are especially on the skin and for portraits, are much more elegant looking, and the dynamic range is great too. You can also apply the portrait mode or wide aperture mode in this as well. The panorama mode offers good stitching, however it does produce some shaky or blurry portions at times if you aren't careful with the panning. The front facing camera is a 13 megapixel camera with an aperture of f2. It produces some great looking photos with plenty of detailing, sharpness, and natural looking colors. Users can then also go for the portrait mode, which again reveals options for beautify as well as bokeh. The bokeh works really well and you get a nice shallow depth of field. Edge detection isn't perfect, but we found it better than most smartphones, the iPhone 10 included, and this bokeh is something that the OnePlus 5T doesn't have. The beautify also works quite well and can be used in tandem with bokeh or as a standalone effect. Video recording is one aspect where Huawei and Honor phones of the past haven't impressed much. Unfortunately, the same remains with the View 10. While the rear-facing camera offers modes such as 4K 30 and 1080p at 30 or 60 fps, the resulting footage isn't very impressive. The video looks good in terms of detailing, colors, and overall has a flat profile, which is useful for people who want to edit their videos. However, there is no EIS, and that results in really shaky videos. I believe that the phone is capable of handling EIS in 4K surely, but it's weird that they haven't included it even for 1080p 30 fps mode. The front-facing camera too can record videos, maxes out at 1080p. Again, the videos are good, but the lack of EIS ruins it. For some reason, we were only able to record at 720p initially, but subsequently a 1080p mode has shown up following an update. This gives us hope that the phone will get EIS on the rear and possibly even the front camera in the future, since it only requires a software algorithm to be applied. And how the sharpness is, the exposure, the focusing, as well as how well it's picking up my audio. It seems like the Honor View 10 may have the best camera in its segment. The photography game is really impressive, and I've already taken several photos with the phone that I can say I'm proud of. It can only get better from here, and it'll be a serious game changer if they add EIS to the videos. Although the main issue right now is that we aren't sure what the segment is, but we feel it may be put head to head with the OnePlus 5T, and the View 10 may be better than that, at least in terms of photography. We'll be doing a detailed camera comparison between the two devices very soon, so please do stay tuned for that. You can purchase the smartphone from the link in the description below. That's it for the video, guys. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next one.